Welcome to Fractured Chaos.
The happiest day of my life became the day I died inside. Not physically, but every part of me that trusted, that loved, that believed in something greater than myself, that all died in an instant. When I tell people this story, they often mistake it for fiction. How I wish it were. The truth is always more devastating than anything we could imagine. I should probably start at the beginning, but honestly, I can't stop thinking about that moment. That singular, life-altering moment when I opened the door to the bridal suite and saw them. My wife, my brother, our wedding cake still undigested in our stomachs. They say that when you experience profound trauma, your mind protects you by blurring the details. Mine did the opposite. Every second of that moment is seared into my memory with excruciating clarity. The soft click of the door as it opened, the way the afternoon sunlight streamed through the half-drawn curtains, illuminating particles of dust floating in the air, the gentle rustle of expensive sheets against bare skin. The look on Ashley's face, not just shock, but something worse. Recognition. Recognition that our marriage had ended before it had truly begun. But there were signs. There are always signs when you look back, like breadcrumbs leading to a truth you weren't ready to acknowledge. Like how my brother Jake insisted on making the wedding toast even though he's terrified of public speaking. "To Ashley and Connor," he said, raising his glass with a trembling hand. "May your love be as enduring as the secrets we keep." At the time, I thought it was just a weird toast from my socially awkward brother. Now I realize it was a confession disguised as a blessing. I always believed that when you marry someone, you marry their past. What I didn't know was that I was marrying my brother's present, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The first time I met Ashley was at Riverside Park during an autumn festival. Fallen leaves crunched beneath our feet as Jake introduced us with a casual, "Connor, this is Ashley. Ashley, my brother Connor." Simple words that would eventually unravel my entire life. Ashley was stunning in that effortless way that makes you forget whatever you were about to say. Auburn hair that caught the sunlight like burnished copper. A smile that created dimples deep enough to drown in. Eyes that seemed to change color with her mood. Sometimes green, sometimes gold, always mesmerizing. "Jake's told me so much about you," she said, extending her hand. I took it, noticing how perfectly it fit in mine. What I didn't notice was the way her gaze lingered on my brother a heartbeat too long, or how Jake's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly when our hands touched. Our courtship was a whirlwind. 3 months later, I knew I wanted to marry her. 6 months later, I proposed at the same park where we met, going down on one knee among the spring blossoms. A year later, we were planning our wedding. 3 months before our wedding, Ashley started acting strange. Nothing dramatic, just little things that seemed inconsequential in isolation but formed a disturbing pattern in retrospect. New perfume that she claimed was just something I'm trying. Mysterious texts that made her smile in a way I'd never seen before. When I asked who it was, she'd say, "Just work stuff," and turn her phone away. There's something about the angle a person holds. Their phone that tells you everything you need to know about what they're hiding. She started taking longer to get ready for bed. Midnight showers became a regular occurrence. "I just feel cleaner," she'd explain with a kiss that tasted of toothpaste and deception. Jake helped me pick out her engagement ring. "She likes emerald cuts," he said with such certainty. I remember thinking it was odd that my brother knew my fiance's ring preference before I did. But then again, Ashley and Jake had become good friends since we started dating. We'd often meet for dinner, the three of us, and I'd watch them banter like old friends. I was happy about that, my future wife and my only brother getting along so well. What a fool I was. Once, I came home early from a business trip to find Jake's car in our driveway. When I entered the house, Ashley was coming out of the shower, hair wet, cheeks flushed. Jake was in the kitchen, opening a bottle of wine. "Surprise!" Ashley exclaimed, wrapping me in a damp embrace. "Jake came over to help me pick out your birthday present. We were just about to have a glass of wine while we looked at options online." I believed her. Why wouldn't I? Jake was my brother, my best man, the person I trusted most in the world after Ashley. The possibility that they were betraying me never crossed my mind, or perhaps it did. But I buried it so deeply that I couldn't acknowledge it even to myself. The day before our wedding, I overheard Ashley on the phone in our guest bathroom. The shower was running, but she wasn't in it, a trick I would later realize. She used often to mask her conversations. "I can't keep doing this," she whispered urgently. "Tomorrow changes everything. You promised me you would—" She stopped abruptly when she saw me standing in the doorway. She hung up immediately and said it was just wedding jitters, talking to her mom. Later that night, I noticed my brother had a missed call at the exact time Ashley was on the phone. I dismissed it. What kind of man suspects his brother and his fiancée on the night before his wedding? Turns out, a man who should trust his instincts. The wedding itself was perfect. Cruel illusion of happiness that would soon shatter. We'd chosen the Rosewood Hotel, an elegant venue with gardens that overlooked the city skyline. 200 guests, a 5-tier cake, a string quartet for the ceremony, and a live band for the reception. Ashley was radiant in white, though I now understand the cruel irony of that color choice. Jake stood beside me as my best man, his hand on my shoulder as we watched Ashley walk down the aisle on her father's arm. Jake's hand was trembling. I thought it was happiness for me. It wasn't. During the ceremony, the officiant asked if anyone objected to our union. In that brief silence, I swear I saw them exchange a glance, a look loaded with meaning that I couldn't decipher at the time. But what happened next was so strange that I'm still trying to make sense of it. Ashley's vows included a line that seemed out of place. "I promise to be faithful to the truth of us, whatever that may be." At the time, I thought it was beautiful, poetic even. Now I wonder if it was her way of not technically lying under oath. When we exchanged rings, Jake's hands trembled so violently that he almost dropped mine. "Sorry," he muttered, avoiding my eyes. "Nervous for you, bro." The kiss that sealed our marriage was brief, almost chaste. Ashley pulled away first, her eyes darting to where Jake stood. I remember thinking she seemed distracted, but attributed it to the overwhelming emotions of the day. How could I have been so blind? The reception was magical, at least on the surface. 5 hours of dancing, drinking, celebrating with friends and family who had no idea they were witnessing not a beginning, but an end. My new wife kept disappearing for touch-ups that seemed to take longer each time. Jake offered to check on her during the third disappearance. She seemed upset about something. Maybe pre-wedding jitters catching up with her, he said casually, straightening his tie in a gesture I would later recognize as nervousness. They both returned 15 minutes later from different directions. Jake's tie was askew. Ashley's lipstick was freshly applied. Her hair, which had been perfectly styled in an intricate updo, now had a few loose strands around her face. Here's something they don't tell you about suspicion. Once it takes root, it grows like a cancer, consuming your thoughts, coloring your perceptions, until everything becomes evidence of betrayal. I started counting the minutes they were gone, noticing how they never stood next to each other for photos but somehow ended up in the same corner during cocktail hour. The way she touched his arm when she laughed at his jokes. Familiar, intimate touches that seemed instinctive rather than calculated. At 11:42 p.m., I got a text from an unknown number. "Wedding gift in the bridal suite. Open the door quietly for a surprise." I assumed it was a surprise from my groomsmen. Maybe something embarrassing but well-intentioned. A practical joke, perhaps, or some romantic setup for our wedding night. I excused myself from a conversation with my new in-laws and headed upstairs. The hallway to the bridal suite seemed longer than before, stretching out endlessly before me. The carpet pattern swirled beneath my feet, or maybe that was the champagne. I remember thinking it was strange that the "Do Not Disturb" sign was already hanging on the door. We weren't due to go upstairs for another hour. I used the keycard and opened the door as quietly as suggested. And there they were. My wife, my brother, half-dressed on the bed that I was supposed to carry her into later that night. They didn't hear me at first. I stood there for what felt like eternity, but was probably only seconds. Ashley was straddling Jake, her wedding dress pushed up around her waist, her veil discarded on the floor. Jake's hands were on her hips, his shirt unbuttoned, his neck marked with the same shade of lipstick that had been on my collar earlier that day. Then Ashley saw me and screamed. Not a scream of fear, but of being caught. Jake jumped up, nearly toppling Ashley to the floor in his haste, his face drained of color, leaving only the bright red marks where her lips had been. "Connor, this isn't," he started to say but stopped. Because what could he possibly say? That it wasn't what it looked like? It was exactly what it looked like. I closed the door, didn't slam it, just closed it quietly and walked back down that long hallway. My phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. Now you know. Who sent those texts? I still don't know. Maybe one of the bridesmaids suspected something. Maybe the hotel staff saw them sneaking off together. Or maybe, and this is the thought that keeps me up at night, maybe it was Jake himself, desperate to get caught, to end the deception that had spiraled out of control. I returned to the reception, my world collapsing around me even as the celebration continued unabated. Nobody noticed anything wrong. The groom stepping away for a few minutes was normal, expected even. The band was playing our song, At Last, by Etta James, the one Ashley and I were supposed to have our final dance to. I walked straight to the bar and ordered a double whiskey, neat. The bartender gave me a wink. Liquid courage for the wedding night, huh? I downed it in one gulp and ordered another. That's when I made my decision, a decision that would either save my dignity or destroy what was left of it. I took the microphone from the band leader. The music stopped. The room fell silent, 200 pairs of eyes swiveling toward me. All eyes on me, including Ashley and Jake, who had just returned to the reception separately, both looking disheveled despite their efforts to compose themselves. Ashley was clutching her bouquet like a shield, knuckles white against the stems. Jake was fixing his tie again, a nervous tic I had never noticed before that night. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "This day has been illuminating." I paused, scanning the crowd. My parents looked expectant, proud. Her parents were beaming. Friends were raising glasses in anticipation of another toast. Especially my brother Jake, I continued, watching his face drain of color for the second time that night. Who has always been so close to Ashley. So close, in fact, that they couldn't wait until after the reception to consummate their relationship. If anyone needs them in the next hour, they'll be in the bridal suite, finishing what I interrupted. The gasps were audible, a collective intake of breath that seemed to suck all the oxygen from the room. Ashley burst into tears, mascara streaming down her cheeks in black rivulets, destroying the perfect makeup that had taken hours to apply. Jake lunged toward me, but two of my cousins held him back. "You don't understand," he shouted, struggling against their grip. "It's not what you think." My parents looked shell-shocked, as if they'd aged a decade in seconds. Her parents looked like they might be sick, her father's complexion turning an alarming shade of purple, her mother reaching for a chair to steady herself. I placed the microphone back on the stand with exaggerated care, walked over to the gift table, grabbed an envelope, and wrote annulment across it in bold letters. I propped it against the wedding cake, still mostly uneaten, the tiny bride and groom figurines standing together atop it in cruel mockery of reality, and walked out. You'd think that would be the end of the story, the dramatic exit. The hero walks away from the villains. Credits roll. But life isn't a movie, and betrayal isn't contained in neat narrative arcs. Because as I drove away from the hotel in my tuxedo, the bow tie discarded on the passenger seat, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Connor, come back," she pleaded, her voice raw with emotion. "This is obviously a misunderstanding. Your brother would never—" "I saw them, Mom," I interrupted. "On our wedding bed. There's no misunderstanding possible." She was silent for a long moment. Then she said something that made my whole world shift again. "There are things you don't know about Jake and Ashley. Things that happened before you even met her." Turns out Jake and Ashley hadn't just met when he introduced us. They had dated seriously in college, before I met her, before she transferred to my university. They had kept it from me because it was just a brief thing, and they didn't want to make it weird. My brother introduced us at that autumn festival, pretending they barely knew each other, when in reality, they had shared a year of their lives together. I pulled the car over on the side of the highway, hazard lights blinking in the darkness. Rain started falling, streaking down the windows like tears on a face. The rage I felt wasn't just about the betrayal in the bridal suite. It was about 3 years of lies. 3 years of them pretending they had just met through me. 3 years of secret glances and inside jokes that now made perfect sense. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" I demanded, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. "We thought it was over between them," my mother said, her voice small and defeated. "Jake told us it was ancient history, that he was happy for you both. We believed him." I hung up and sat in silence for a long time, watching the rain blur the headlights of passing cars. Then I called Ashley. She answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting by her phone. I could hear chaos in the background. Raised voices, crying, the distinctive sound of glass breaking. "How long has it been going on?" I asked, my voice eerily calm even to my own ears. She knew exactly what I meant. "It never stopped," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the commotion around her. "I tried to end it when you proposed. I really did. I thought I could love you more than I loved him. I wanted to." "Then why marry me?" I demanded, slamming my hand against the dashboard. Her answer chilled me to the bone. "Jake was supposed to stop the wedding. He promised he would object when the officiant asked. He chickened out." That's when I realized the true depth of their betrayal. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just two people succumbing to forbidden attraction. This was a calculated plan that went wrong. I was just collateral damage in their twisted love story. "So, what was the plan?" I asked, morbidly curious about the mechanics of my own destruction. "I get publicly humiliated at the altar, and then what? You two ride off into the sunset together?" "It wasn't like that," Ashley sobbed. "We were going to tell you before the wedding. Jake promised he would talk to you. He kept saying he would, but he never did. Then it was too late, and he said he would object during the ceremony. When he didn't, I thought maybe he had changed his mind, that he was letting me go. So I went through with it, and then decided to fuck him in our bridal suite?" The vulgarity felt foreign on my tongue, but nothing about this situation called for civility. "He came to me," she said, her voice hardening slightly. "Said he couldn't bear to see me with you, that he'd made a terrible mistake letting the wedding happen. One thing led to another." "Spare me the details," I cut her off. "Just tell me one thing. Was any of it real? Any of what you felt for me?" The silence stretched so long I thought she had hung up. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I did love you, Connor. Just not enough. But there was one more revelation waiting for me, one that would turn my understanding of this betrayal on its head." I drove to Jake's apartment. I still had a key. Brothers, right? The place was a mess as usual. Clothes strewn about, dishes piled in the sink, empty beer bottles on the coffee table. But I wasn't there to judge his housekeeping. I went straight to his desk drawer, where he kept his important papers. Jake is methodical about some things, chaotic about others. I found what I was looking for almost immediately. A small black book. His journal. I shouldn't have read it. Some truths are too heavy to carry. But I needed to know how deep this went. The journal entries went back years. Long before Ashley. Long before me. It detailed Jake's resentment toward me. How he always felt second best. How I got the attention, the praise, the opportunities. How our parents preferred me. Something I never felt was true. But through his eyes, everything I saw as normal sibling dynamics was evidence of a deep parental preference that had scarred him. "Connor made varsity baseball today," one entry from our high school years read. "Dad actually teared up. He never cried when I made honor roll. Never even seemed to notice." Another from the year I graduated college. "Connor got the job at Mercer & Stone. The golden boy strikes again. Meanwhile, I'm still paying off student loans and working at a job that makes me want to jump off a bridge. But hey, at least Mom and Dad have one son they can brag about." The entries grew progressively darker, chronicling a resentment that festered into something toxic. Then came the entries about Ashley. The first mention of her was casual. "Met a girl at Jeff's party. Ashley. She's different from the others. Smart. Doesn't take my bullshit. I think this one might be serious." Later entries detailed their relationship, the ups and downs, their arguments, their reconciliations. Then came the entry that made my blood run cold. "Ashley's transferring to state. Says she needs a change. I know it's because of our fight. She'll come around. She always does." The next entry was dated 3 months later. "Connor texted today. Says he met someone. Ashley. My Ashley. Can't be a coincidence. She must have sought him out. Is this her way of getting back at me? Using my own brother?" The entries grew increasingly obsessive, detailing his plan to win her back while maintaining the facade of the supportive brother. "Ashley came by today. Says she misses me. We ended up in bed again. She cried after. Said she feels terrible about Connor. I told her we'll figure it out. And we will. On my terms." The final entry was dated the day before our wedding. "Tomorrow C marries A. They think I'm the best man, but the best man will get the girl in the end. The perfect revenge. Ashley thinks we're going to tell him together after the honeymoon. She has no idea. I'll stop the wedding just like I promised, and watch Connor's face when he realizes his perfect life isn't so perfect after all. It wasn't love that drove Jake to betray me. It was hatred. Ashley was just a pawn in his game of sibling rivalry taken to a psychotic extreme. I took the journal and drove to our parents' house. They were still at the reception, dealing with the fallout of my revelation. The house was quiet, still adorned with rehearsal dinner decorations from the night before. Photos of Jake and me through the years lined the hallway. Brothers, best friends, enemies. I placed the journal on the kitchen table with a note. The truth about your sons. Then I did something I never thought I was capable of. Something risky, perhaps even reckless. I went to my father's study and opened his safe. The combination was my birthday. Ironic, considering what I now knew about family loyalty. Inside was the deed to our family's lake house, a property that had been in our family for generations. The one piece of property that Jake coveted above all else. Dad had promised it would be split between us eventually. I took the deed. Not to keep it, but to destroy any claim Jake might have to it. I signed away my half to a conservation trust, ensuring neither of us would ever own it. The lake house would become a nature preserve, open to the public year-round. The place where we spent summers building brotherly bonds that I now understood were fictional would now be open to everyone. A permanent reminder that what Jake destroyed wasn't just mine to give away. As I was leaving, headlights swept across the driveway. My parents had returned from the reception earlier than I expected. I slipped out the back door and watched from the garden as they entered the house. I could see their silhouettes through the kitchen window as they found the journal. My mother sat down heavily, her hand over her mouth. My father paced back and forth, occasionally stopping to read pages over her shoulder. My phone buzzed incessantly with texts. From Ashley, from Jake, from friends who had witnessed my reception revelation and wanted to offer support or satisfy their curiosity. I ignored them all. Then one final text came through from that same unknown number. The truth hurts everyone. Was it worth it? Was it? I didn't reply. Instead, I drove to the airport and bought a ticket for the first flight out. I needed distance, perspective, a life free from the two people who had shattered my trust so completely. That was 6 months ago. I've been living in another state, rebuilding my life piece by piece. I haven't spoken to Ashley or Jake since that night. The annulment went through without contest. My parents call regularly, but they never mention Jake anymore. From mutual friends, I've heard that Ashley moved out of state too. Jake lost his job after showing up drunk too many times and moved back in with our parents. My mother sounds tired on the phone. My father rarely speaks at all. Last week, I received a package, no return address. Inside was a sonogram picture and a handwritten note. 8 weeks. DNA test confirms it's yours, not his. I didn't know when I married you. I'm not asking for anything. Just thought you should know. The date on the sonogram matched back to our honeymoon, a trip I took alone as a way to clear my head, to grieve what should have been. I'd booked a beachfront villa in Maui, paid for in advance, non-refundable. So I went, spent 2 weeks alternating between swimming until my muscles gave out and drinking until I couldn't feel the pain. On the third night, there was a knock at my door. Ashley stood there, mascara-stained cheeks, hair wild from the ocean breeze. "Please," she said. 5 minutes. That's all I ask. I should have closed the door. But something in her eyes, desperation, remorse, I don't know what, made me step aside. She came in, sat on the edge of the bed we should have shared as newlyweds, and told me everything. How she and Jake had dated in college. How it had ended badly when she caught him cheating. How she had transferred schools to get away from him, never expecting to meet his brother. "When you asked me out, I had no idea you were related," she insisted. "It wasn't until you took me home for Christmas and Jake walked in that I realized. By then, I was already falling for you. I thought it was fate giving me a second chance at happiness. But Jake had other ideas. He pursued her relentlessly, showing up at her workplace, sending messages that alternated between apologies and threats. He said he would tell you about our past," she explained, tears streaming down her face. "Make it seem like I had targeted you deliberately. I was afraid you wouldn't believe me. So she gave in. Once, then again, until it became a pattern she couldn't break. Every time I swore it would be the last. Every time, He would remind me of what I stood to lose if you found out. Not just you, but my reputation, my friendships with your family. I listened in silence, the pain of betrayal competing with a stubborn ember of love that refused to be extinguished. When she finished speaking, I stood up and walked to the minibar. I poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed her one. "To the truth," I said, raising my glass. "To second chances," she replied, her eyes hopeful. We drank. We talked more. She cried. I might have too. The bottle emptied. Another appeared. The boundaries blurred. I remember wanting to hurt Jake the way he hurt me. I remember her skin against mine, salt tears mingling with salt sweat. I remember thinking this was goodbye, not reconciliation. When I woke the next morning, she was gone. A note on the pillow. "I'll always love you both, but I can't have either of you. Goodbye." I never expected to hear from her again. Certainly never expected to receive evidence of a child. My child, if the DNA test she referenced was accurate. Born from spite and regret, and maybe the last remnants of what I thought was love. Yesterday, I called Ashley for the first time since that night in Maui. The number had changed, but social media made her easy to find. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice cautious. "It's Connor," I said unnecessarily. "I know," she replied softly. I asked her one question. Was any of it real? After a long silence, she answered, "The only real thing was your love for me. Everything else was a lie." Then she told me the final truth, the one that somehow hurt more than all the others. Jake never loved me, not in college, not later. He only pursued me because I was yours, and I was so blinded by our history that I let him use me to hurt you. The baby is the one true thing to come out of all this deception. So here I am, a man with no wife, no brother, but a child on the way. A child who deserves better than to be born into this web of betrayal and revenge. I called my parents last night and told them about the baby. My mother cried, not in joy, but in that complex emotion that comes when happiness collides with grief. My father was silent for a long time before saying, "Some families break beyond repair. Others find a way to rebuild from the rubble. Which will we be, son? I don't have an answer yet, but tomorrow I'm flying back home. Not for Jake. I doubt I'll ever forgive him completely. Not even for Ashley. Whatever we might have had is gone, replaced by something more complicated, defined by the child we created. But for this baby who had no say in the chaos they're being born into. And maybe, just maybe, for the man I used to be before I opened that hotel room door and watched my world collapse. Because the thing about collapsed worlds is this. Once everything falls apart, you can see what was truly valuable among the ruins. What remains for me isn't hatred or revenge. It's the possibility of something new, something honest, something real. Yesterday I received another text from that unknown number. Some betrayals are unforgivable, but some aren't meant to be forgiven. They're meant to set you free. I finally replied, "Who are you?" The response came immediately. Someone who knows what it's like to be collateral damage in someone else's war. Someone who thought you deserved to know the truth. I still don't know who sent those texts, who orchestrated the moment of revelation in the bridal suite. Perhaps I never will. Perhaps it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what happens next. Ashley has agreed to co-parenting, but nothing more. Jake has checked himself into rehab, not for my sake, but because he finally hit bottom. My parents are selling the house, too full of memories, both good and poisoned. I've rented an apartment close to where Ashley is living, preparing for the birth of my child in 7 months. People ask me if I regret discovering the truth. If I wish I had remained ignorant, married to a woman who loved my brother to a man who hated me. I tell them no. The truth, however painful, is always preferable to a beautiful lie. The most devastating words I ever heard were, "My wife slept with my brother." But the most hopeful words might be the ones I haven't spoken yet. "Hello, I'm your father." Sometimes endings are just beginnings in disguise. And sometimes, the family you create matters more than the one you were born into. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I'm ready to find out.